Good morning. It is so good to see all of you, and I know we have some visitors in the office. Well, we're in the audience. Several of my students are here, and we're so thankful you've come our way. Coach Kevin Starks, who read for us the lesson text this morning, asked about my three guys on the front row. He pulled me over to the side as we were getting ready to start our worship service this morning. He said, "Coach, are those guys in detention?" No, Coach, not in detention. We're thankful that you're here. I also believe I see Emma and Evan Sanderman in the back. Welcome home. We're glad you're here. I love that we get to meet together each week and come together as a family and worship God. Don't you? And I love that we get to see each other go through phases of life. Don't you? I love that we get to celebrate things like a beautiful wedding yesterday. And it was beautiful. Great job. Don't you? But I'm also thankful that we get to go through hard things together. That we don't have to do it alone. Don't you? And I love that we get to see the journey that we go through. I remember when I was a student at the university, they would often do a concert each year for the student body. And one year they decided to do a concert. It was on the steps of Willard Collins Auditorium. And they would do their best to get a name that was well known in the industry or around town, and I'll never forget they got Martina McBride to come and have a concert on the steps there for the student body. She had an opening act, and it was this guy that was not many people had heard of. He had had one hit on the radio. If you call it a hit, it had had some radio time. But he looked different than what you expected back in 1993. He had long black hair and he had a handlebar mustache. It wasn't really common then, as much as maybe you would think of it today. He wore a black hat and he came out and he started singing, and it was, oh, he's pretty good. And then he said, "We want to sing a song for you that we're going to release this fall that we think will be the steps to reaching the mountain peak. We think this will start our career." And he started singing a song that later became an incredible hit, Indian Outlaw, as we saw Tim McGraw start his career there on the steps. And it has been really fun to watch his career from that beginning. What you may not know is Tim McGraw hasn't always been on the mountain peak. As a matter of fact, he didn't even start this life with a last name McGraw. He actually took his stepfather's name when he was young, Tim Smith. And he didn't realize that his father, Tug McGraw, a famous baseball player, was his father until he was 11 years old. He tried to contact his biological father and did, and his father refused to acknowledge that he was his son at first. It was only much later when apparently the resemblance was so striking that he could no longer deny it. And at age 18, his father did admit, "That is my son." And McGraw changed his name back to what it should have been from the beginning, McGraw. You know him as a country music superstar, right? You know him as stratosphere in the country music industry. As a matter of fact, we have a guest in our audience whose father has written one of his mega hits. And it's been fun to watch him, but did you know he had a beginning that wasn't as easy? Late in his career, he came out with a song that I find especially maybe telling of his journey. In 2016, he sang a song and performed, became a #1 hit called Humble and Kind. Do you remember this song? Here's some of the words to that song. Hold the door, say please, say thank you. Don't steal, don't cheat, don't lie. I know you got mountains to climb, but always stay humble and kind. When those dreams you're dreaming come to you, when your work you've put in is realized, let yourself feel the pride, but always stay humble and kind. Don't expect a free ride from no one. Don't hold grudges or a chip. And here's why. Bitterness keeps you from flying. Always stay humble and kind. The song won Best Country Song for the 59th Grammy Awards. It won Best Video of the Year and Song of the Year for the CMT that year. And it also won the American Music Awards Country Song of the Year. To date, it has sold over 1,400,000 copies in the United States alone. Maybe we all understand what it takes to have a beginning and to climb mountains. Some think of the idea of mountains to climb as a path to success, that it may be difficult to find or to attain your goals. But I want to talk to you today that sometimes it may mean difficult tasks or challenges in your life. Have you ever considered this? We talk about God calling us to something all the time. But have you ever thought about God? He might be calling us out of something instead of to something. It reminds me so much of the Psalms. And I'm thankful for Coach Starks and reading Psalm 121 for us this morning. The Psalms are a collection of 150 ancient Hebrew poems, songs, and prayers that comes from all types of authors in Israel's history. It has 73 psalms that are connected to King David. But there's also authors known as Asaph. There's one named as Korah. There are several that are anonymous from temple worship leaders. But we also have psalms from Solomon and even one from Moses. I think it's interesting that King David, I consider the greatest warrior to ever live, was also known as a poet. He was also known as someone that played the harp. Now, many of these poems were meant to be sung. But this collection of psalms is not a hymn book. At some point in the period right after Israel's exile to Babylon, these ancient poems were gathered together with intentional arrangement. And now we have what we call our book of Psalms. It's really separated into 5 different parts. And after each part, there's a message about a future messianic kingdom, a great hope for mountains that we must climb. It gives God's people hope. It gives God's people hope for a future. It gives God's people hope for miracles still to come. You see, I believe, like the exile of the Israelites from Egypt, God's not done yet. I believe that God is still actively working in our world today. I think God is active in redeeming his people. There's lots of different kinds of poems that we find in the book of Psalms. But they basically can be brought down to two major categories. The first is a lament. A lament is a poem that expresses pain, confusion, anger, and how horrible the world is around you, and how horrible the world is around its author. But it doesn't leave it at that. It's a lament that calls on God to do something with what's going on, with the circumstances that someone's experiencing. There's a lot of laments in Psalms, which tells us something really important. Are you ready for this? Some of you need to hear this today. A lament is an appropriate response to evil you're experiencing. A lament is an appropriate response when you've been done wrong. The second of the different types of psalms or poems is a song of praise or psalm of praise. It's of joy and celebration. It draws attention to what God has done in the world. It retells stories of what God has done in our lives, and it thanks God. But here's something that's really interesting. If you were to read all the Psalms together in succession, you would find out this, that it goes from a lot of laments at the beginning of the book to more praise at the end of the book. I believe that's intentional. I believe that shift is profound. I think it tells us something about the nature of prayer. I think it tells us something about the nature of climbing mountains. Sometimes we feel like God's abandoned us. He's left us. Oh, he's not leaving us. Sometimes he's holding our head above water. He's the only reason we have oxygen to breathe. Because without him, surely we would sink to the depths. He's the reason we still can hope for a messianic kingdom. It teaches us something. It creates tension as we look at the life we live in, and we realize that this world is evil. But it's not our home. As Peter says, we are resident aliens here. We're strangers in a foreign world. We're not meant for this world. We're meant for something much better. And so the Psalms teach us not only to pray for what we're experiencing in our lives, but it also teaches us that God doesn't leave us where we are. It teaches us to trust that the Lord is moving even when you don't see it. He's doing something. And the future is sure. We can count on him. He keeps his promises. All this brings us to Psalm 121. It's not strictly a lament at all. As a matter of fact, it's rather a psalm of confidence of God's promises. That's why I bring it before you today, so that you too can be confident of the promises that God gives us. Some of us are dealing with mountains today and troubles. Some of us realize that though it may be calm right now, a storm may be brewing in our future. But all of this we're reminded how great God is. Listen again to Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and guess what? Forevermore. Always. You know, Psalm 121 is actually a group also with another group of Psalms, and they're called Psalms of Ascent. I believe it goes from Psalm 120 to Psalm 134. And they were oftentimes sung by Jews as they entered in Jerusalem. And I think about Scott Sager being in Jerusalem today. Jerusalem sits on a hill. And these psalms will be sung as they entered into that great city. This psalm of praise to God that was sung as Jews made their pilgrimage to that great city of promise. They describe the greatness of God and how constant He shows up in our life, how He's constantly at work at care for His people. And whether you are in the middle of trouble right now or trouble is in your future, I think there are three takeaways that we can find from this psalm that will help us today. Three things that I believe you could carry with you. Number one, the Creator is our helper. Psalm 121 reminds us that God is present to help those who seek Him. It promises that those who will seek Him will find the Lord. If they turn to the Lord, He's there. But it's not a promise for those who are spiritually apathetic. It doesn't make promises to those that don't seek the Lord. But those that do seek Him will find a hope that's beyond for all the hope that you could consider. You need to understand that the Creator is our helper. It's to understand that our own intelligence, wit, resources, strength, they're not enough. As a matter of fact, they're completely insufficient. We need God. We need God now. We need God later. We need God constantly. And we need God exclusively. The Creator is our helper. Turn to Him first. Number two, not only is the Creator our helper, the God of Israel is your protector. Everything in this world is going to clamor for your attention. Think about this. Your flesh will tell you that it has enough strength. Our culture will tell you to rely on our systems to deliver us from sadness and create safety. It'll give us satisfaction. The devil will whisper to you lies that giving up all hope is okay. But we can lift our eyes above all of that. We don't have to be enticed by any of that because they've never made a single thing better in our life. The flesh, the world, the devil, they only destroy, decay, and ruin. But the Lord, he creates, he sustains, he purifies. The Lord will protect us. The Lord is our helper. And finally, you need to know that the Lord will keep us from all harm. We've learned just recently, we never know what's going to happen, do we? There may be a day that you get called in that you never expected. But not a single event takes God by surprise. He is thoroughly in our lives. He knows every event that's happening in the world. Our God never takes a break from caring for us. He never takes respite from watching over us. Our Father is ever vigilant and fully concerned with us, his children. The Lord has no need for a nap. He's always in control. We can always look to him for our help. I know you have mountains to climb, but it's time to stop struggling with them on your own. We can stay humble and kind because we know who will help us conquer our mountain. The Lord is good all the time. All the time. God is good. If we can help you today in prayer, if we can walk alongside of you, we'd love to do it. Why don't you come while we stand and sing?